Hi everyone, I am Anna and welcome back to the Diary of Atomic Love. Today we are going to talk about incredible pain and how that relates to love by talking about the crucifixion of Jesus. And today we are looking at 4 verses. First is Matthew 27 through 32, 27, 32 through 56, where you can read the events leading up to the crucifixion and the details of the crucifixion. And you hear about the division of Jesus's clothes and how he was mocked by soldiers. In Mark 15, 21 through 41, you hear more details about the crucifixion. In Luke 23, 26 through 49, you hear the same details similar to both Matthew and Mark. And in 1 John 19, 17 through 37, it's recounted again, but it puts emphasis on the significance of the sacrifice of Jesus by crucifixion. Now, the crucifixion of Jesus is recorded several times in the Bible. And when you take time to read through the messages and the passages, you begin to understand a lot more. Mostly about how incredible this was in theology and the forming of the Christian church and how we understand the church today. Now, on February 5th, I shared with you about the Holy Trinity, and in that message, I said the New Testament in God in the New Testament identifies himself as the one who sent Jesus into the world to bring salvation to humanity. And I say this is where we find out about God's true unconditional love and his plan for humanity. The Son of God is Jesus Christ and is the second person of the Trinity. We learn he's not just a man, but he's also God created on earth as a man so that we can relate to each other. While here he taught others about God, he performed miracles, and of course he was persecuted, died, buried, and rose from the dead. And you hear verses reminding you that by sacrificing his son, God showed compassion, mercy, and grace to all of humanity. And by sacrificing his son, you understand the depth of that love. I'm going to go back to one sentence, and it is that we learn that he is not just a man, but he is also God, created on earth as man, so we and he could relate to each other. Now, that is incredibly important. And as I finish today's message, I want you to keep in mind the purpose of God coming as Jesus, as a man, onto the earth and why that was happening. It is because, especially in pain, it would be hard for humans to relate to omnipresence. And it's easier for us to relate to each other as human beings. And so it was necessary for Jesus to be here because not only did he teach us about humanity, but because he went through pain, then when we go through pain, we have a human to relate to. So I'll continue with today's message in that these verses that I shared with you, I've read them more than once. And I won't try to explain the emotions in reading it. I'll only say that I have cried an incredible number of tears, thinking that Jesus was treated as nothing more than a criminal. The scripture describes his death in detail, how Pilate himself fastened the cross with the notice, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. How the soldiers took his clothes, dividing them among themselves, leaving him with nothing but an undergarment, and then casting lots to see who would get that once he was dead. It tells you that his mother Mary, his mother's sister Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene witnessed it all. And when Jesus saw them, he called on one of his beloved disciples to care for his mother. They mocked him. They hurled insults at him. They ridiculed him for not saving himself and the 2 criminals that hung next to him, one on the right and one on the left. One of them insulted him, and the other rebuked, asking why they were doing this to Jesus because he was innocent. The criminal repented. And as you learn, Jesus answered, "Truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." Darkness came for 3 hours as Jesus hung dying. The curtain of the temple was torn in two. When Jesus said he was thirsty, he was offered wine vinegar in a soaked sponge. And with that, he said in a very loud voice, "It is finished," committing his spirit and his soul to the Father as he bowed his head and died a very human death. And then even after he died, his side was pierced with a spear, bringing water and blood. And the man who witnessed it gave a testimony so that even today we might all believe. Because he recognized the righteousness of Jesus. This is the fulfillment of the prophecy of Jesus Christ, who sacrificed for the sin of humanity. His declaration, "It is finished," is not a statement of defeat, but completion. And the penalty for sin was paid, the power of sin was broken, and the prophecy fulfilled, giving human access to God and hope for humanity having been established. Now, if you are a Christian, you already know this story well. There's good news to come. Jesus will be laid to rest in the tomb, rise on the third day. And this is one of the most central events of Christianity. The central event. This history saves us all from spiritual death, if we choose it. But as I have studied, I learned something that most people don't know and maybe have never learned. And I want to share it with you today so that you can understand better why I've cried when I read these verses. And as we move forward, it's really important for you to understand what I'm about to say. Because when you realize the depth of the pain that Jesus suffered, it will become extremely important as we move through the next week and we understand the true depth of what was going on. It's much more than what you think. Jesus suffered from a rare kind of pain. It's called hematidrosis. It is simply the sweating of blood. Now, this only occurs when the human body is under extreme emotional anguish and the tiny vessels around the sweat glands start to rupture and the blood begins to mix with perspiration. Less than 5 cases have ever been recorded in existence. Jesus lived hours at the level of stress that no human body has ever survived. Hours. So you might ask, why do I share this with you? Because I want you to understand that this pain only occurs when the body is faced with extreme suffering. The Bible tells you the story in detail. But do you really understand what Jesus faced on the cross? He carried the fullness of human fear and sorrow at a depth that no one has ever experienced or lived through. His suffering was so great that his body sweat blood. He willingly chose in most painful agony to redeem humanity. Willingly, and with unconditional love. Now, if that doesn't change you, if that does not help you see what an incredible gift we have received, how indescribable it is. If you cannot understand that God did not just send us blessings, He sent Himself. If you cannot understand that, then I'm unsure what might change you. Because you've been learning that life literally flows from a place marked by excruciating death. The cross settled your future, and the resurrection secured it. And as we go through the lessons for the next week, before we get down to the human behavior of love and why it fails, I hope today that you see that you do not need to suffer, because he suffered for you in an indescribable and unconditional love. And that should be the only thing that remains in your heart. Join me tomorrow as we discuss awakening to the unconditional love of God. I hope to see you there. My friends, in a world where you can be anything, choose to be love. Love is the answer. If this resonated with you, please like and share my post. And thank you for your donations to my divine mission and for helping me to keep my messages alive. I will see you tomorrow.